Michael Jordan did not hand out respect like a gift. Not to rivals. Not to legends. Not to anybody who stood in the way of his name. Jordan was the type of competitor who could hear one sentence, one comparison, one small piece of doubt, and turn it into fuel for years. If somebody said Magic Johnson was better, he remembered it. If somebody said Larry Bird was better, he remembered that too. If somebody said a younger player reminded them of him, Jordan treated it like an insult. That is why his respect for Larry Bird hits different. Because when Michael Jordan spoke about Bird, it did not sound like polite praise. It sounded like a warning. A warning to anyone who thought Larry Bird was just some slow forward from the 80s. A warning to anyone who watched old clips and thought they understood the whole story. A warning to anyone who believed greatness only looks like speed, vertical leap, crossover highlights, or viral dunks. Jordan knew better. He had seen something in Bird that casual fans still miss. And the truth is, Jordan was not impressed by empty confidence. He was not moved by reputation alone. He did not care how many people liked you, how many trophies you had, or how many stories reporters told about you. Jordan respected one thing above everything else. Killers. Players who could walk into pressure and control it. Players who could make elite opponents feel small. Players who did not just win games, but took something from you while doing it. That was Larry Bird. To most modern fans, Bird's image feels almost too simple. The tall white guy from French Lick. The slow-looking forward in short shorts. The shooter with the awkward release. The Celtic legend people bring up when they talk about old-school basketball. But that version is too clean, too soft, too incomplete. Because the players who actually faced Larry Bird do not describe him like a harmless shooter from another era. They describe him like a problem, a nightmare, a man who could embarrass you before the possession even started. Magic Johnson understood it. Charles Barkley understood it. Dominique Wilkins understood it. Reggie Miller understood it. And Michael Jordan understood it more than most, because Jordan saw the game through the same ruthless lens. Bird was not trying to entertain you. He was trying to take your confidence. That is where the story really starts. Not with a stat sheet. Not with a highlight reel. Not with a basic debate about rings and rankings. It starts with the fact that Michael Jordan, maybe the most competitive basketball player ever, looked at Larry Bird and saw something familiar. Not the athleticism. Not the style. The mentality. Bird did not beat people the way Jordan beat people. He was not floating in the air, twisting through defenders, making impossible finishes look effortless. He was not Magic, smiling while turning the game into theater. He was not Barkley, throwing his body into people and overpowering them with force. Bird's weapon was colder than that. He controlled the room. He controlled the defender. He controlled the moment before the moment even arrived. He could look at you, tell you where he was going, tell you what shot he was about to take, and then hit it anyway. That is not just confidence. That is psychological violence in basketball form. And that is why Jordan respected him. Because Jordan knew how rare that was. Most players talk after they score. Bird talked before he scored. Then he made you live with the fact that you knew what was coming and still could not stop it. That is the kind of thing that follows a player home. That is the kind of thing that makes a defender remember one possession for the rest of his life. That is the kind of thing that turns a great player into a legend other legends still talk about decades later. But here is the part that makes Jordan's respect even more powerful. Jordan did not grow up in the NBA being treated like the chosen one by everyone. He entered a league where Magic and Bird already owned the conversation. They were the faces of basketball. They were the rivalry. They were the reason the league felt alive again. And young Jordan had to hear it constantly. You are good, but you are not Magic. You are good, but you are not Bird. For a player like Jordan, that was not criticism. That was gasoline. Every comparison became personal. Every doubt became another log on the fire. And still, even after building himself into the most feared player in the sport, Jordan never tried to erase Bird's greatness. That matters. Because Jordan had every reason to be dismissive. He could have reduced Bird to an older rival. He could have pushed the idea that his era had passed him. He could have acted like athletic dominance made Bird's style outdated. But he did not. Instead, Jordan recognized that Bird belonged in a different category. Not because Bird looked unstoppable, because he made people feel helpless. That is the difference. Some stars beat you with talent. Bird beat you with certainty. He played like he already knew the answer before everyone else had even read the question. He saw the court differently. He understood timing differently. He understood weakness differently. And once he sensed fear, hesitation, or pride in a defender, he attacked it without mercy. That is what Jordan respected. Not just the shot, the control behind the shot. Not just the trash talk, the fact that the trash talk came true. Not just the confidence, the punishment that followed it. And this is where the modern conversation gets lazy. People look at Bird and ask if he was athletic enough for today. But the better question is more uncomfortable. How many players today could survive being mentally hunted by Larry Bird? Because Bird was not just playing basketball. He was reading you, and once he figured you out, the game stopped feeling fair. That is why Jordan's words still carry weight. Because when a competitor like Jordan gives that kind of respect, it is not nostalgia. It is not friendship. It is not media talk. It is recognition. One killer seeing another. And the deeper you go into the stories players tell about Larry Bird, the more obvious it becomes that Jordan was not exaggerating. He was telling people what the league already knew. Larry Bird did not just play mind games. He won with them. Larry Bird did not trash talk the way most players trash talk. He was not loud for attention. He was not trying to entertain the crowd. And he definitely was not joking. That is what made him dangerous. Most players use trash talk to create energy. Bird used it to create fear. There is a huge difference. Because Bird did not wait until after the shot went in. He did not scream after a dunk or start barking once momentum shifted. No, Bird would tell you exactly what was about to happen before the ball even left his hands. Then he would make it happen anyway. And once that happened to you, it stayed with you. That is why so many legends still sound almost uncomfortable when they talk about him. Charles Barkley once described Bird as the coldest trash talker he had ever seen. Not the funniest, not the loudest, the coldest. Barkley talked about Bird looking defenders directly in the eye and saying things that sounded impossible in the moment. "I'm going right there. I'm shooting it in your face. This one's your Christmas present." Then the shot would drop exactly the way Bird said it would. That is not normal confidence. That is control. And the scariest part was how calm Bird stayed while doing it. No dramatic screaming. No chest pounding. Just a quiet certainty that made opponents feel trapped before the possession even started. Think about how hard basketball already is at the highest level. The speed, the pressure, the physicality, the noise, the expectations. Now imagine guarding a player who is calmly predicting your embarrassment in real time while thousands of people watch. That messes with you mentally, especially when the prediction comes true over and over again. Dominique Wilkins felt it early. Young Dominique entered the league as one of the most explosive athletes basketball had ever seen. Fast, violent, fearless. A human highlight reel before the internet even existed. But Bird did not care about any of that. In one of their early matchups, Bird immediately started attacking him psychologically, telling him he did not belong, talking after every possession, making sure every bucket came with humiliation attached to it. And Bird kept doing it because he understood something most players never fully learn. Basketball is emotional warfare. If you can break a defender emotionally, the game becomes easier physically. That is exactly what Bird mastered. Reggie Miller learned the same lesson. Reggie was one of the greatest trash talkers ever himself, but even he admitted Bird's version felt different. Bird's words were not random insults. They were warnings, calculated, precise, timed perfectly. That is why opponents remembered them for decades. Because Bird's trash talk exposed something terrifying underneath it. Preparation. He already knew where your weakness was. He already knew how he wanted to attack you. And once he sensed insecurity, frustration, or hesitation, he kept pressing on it until the entire game tilted in his direction. That level of mental pressure wears people down. It makes defenders rush rotations. It makes stars force shots. It makes teams panic. And Bird loved that feeling. Not because he wanted attention, because he wanted control. That is what separated him from normal competitors. A lot of players want to dominate physically. Bird wanted to dominate psychologically first. And nowhere was that clearer than the three-point contest stories. The most famous one almost sounds fake when you hear it now. Bird walks into the locker room before the contest, looks around at the best shooters in basketball, and calmly asks one question. Which one of you is finishing second? No hype, no smile, no speech, just disrespect delivered like fact. Imagine hearing that from somebody who fully believed it. And the worst part? Nobody really argued back, because deep down they believed it too. That is the power of reputation when your game keeps backing up your words. Then Bird went out there and won the contest again. Warm-up jacket still on. Finger raised before the final shot even dropped. Like the ending had already been written in his head before anyone else stepped on the floor. Those moments became legendary because they represented something bigger than shooting ability. Bird made elite players feel powerless. And once that feeling enters a locker room, it spreads fast. That is why Michael Jordan respected him so much. Jordan understood mental warfare better than almost anyone. He knew greatness was not just about skill. It was about pressure, manipulation, fear, intimidation, creating an atmosphere where opponents started doubting themselves. Bird did all of that naturally, not through athletic dominance, through confidence so real it became oppressive. And the truth is, Bird's trash talk only worked because his game was complete. If you talk and fail, people laugh at you. If you predict greatness and miss, the moment dies immediately. But Bird almost always delivered. That is what made the stories grow larger every year. Not because they were exaggerated, because they kept happening. One jumper after another, one prediction after another, one embarrassed defender after another. Eventually players stopped reacting like victims. Some started reacting like fans. That is how unbelievable Bird became. There were moments when even opponents on the bench were laughing at what they were watching because the performance felt unreal. Like they were witnessing somebody controlling the game from inside everyone else's head. And honestly, maybe they were, because by the time Bird fully entered his prime, he was no longer just beating teams. He was controlling the emotional temperature of entire arenas. And once he learned how to do that consistently, basketball itself started changing around him. Especially when another superstar arrived in Los Angeles ready to challenge everything Bird represented. The league did not need another star. It needed war. Before Larry Bird and Magic Johnson became the faces of basketball, the NBA was not the cultural machine people know today. The talent was there. But the league was still fighting for attention, still trying to become something bigger than a sport people only checked in on during the finals. Then Bird and Magic arrived from two different worlds. Magic came with light. Bird came with edge. Magic was Los Angeles. Showtime. Speed. Smile. Flash. Bird was Boston. Grit. Silence. Cold eyes. Half-court patience. A player who looked unimpressed by everything, including you. That contrast was perfect. Fans did not get two stars. They got two philosophies crashing into each other. The Lakers wanted to run you out of the building. The Celtics wanted to make you suffer inside it. And Bird became the perfect villain for Los Angeles and the perfect warrior for Boston. Magic understood it early. Bird was not just another rival. Bird gave him a measuring stick, a reason every finals possession, every headline, and every debate felt heavier. But Bird did not want the rivalry softened. Magic could turn competition into friendship. He smiled. He talked. He connected with people. He could charm a room before destroying a team. But Bird looked at that smile and saw danger. He knew Magic was not harmless just because he was charismatic. Bird understood what was hiding under that grin. Killer. And because Bird respected that, he wanted the tension to stay alive. He needed that line between respect and rivalry sharp, because that line made the competition feel real. That is why Lakers versus Celtics did not feel like normal basketball. It felt personal. East against West, Hollywood against blue collar, Flash against fundamentals, Magic's smile against Bird's stare, and the NBA needed every bit of it. Suddenly basketball had a story casual fans could understand before they even learned the playbook. You could look at Bird and Magic and immediately feel the conflict. One looked like joy, the other looked like judgment. And when they met in the finals, the league finally had appointment television. But here is what gets lost when people talk about this rivalry today. Bird was not just Magic's opposite. He was Magic's pressure. Every time Magic rose, Bird was there. Every time the Lakers looked unstoppable, Boston was waiting. Every time the media tried to crown one side, the other side pushed back harder. That kind of rivalry creates greatness because it gives both players nowhere to hide. If Magic slipped, Bird's name got louder. If Bird failed, Magic's smile looked bigger. Neither man could relax. That is how legends are built. Not in comfort, in pressure. Bird's personality was made for that environment. He did not need to be liked by everyone. He needed the ball, the moment, and somebody across from him who thought they could take it. That is why Boston fit him so perfectly. The city did not want pretty. It wanted tough. It wanted honest. Bird gave Boston that. The Celtics were not just trying to score. They were trying to wear you down emotionally. And Bird was the brain at the center of it all. He could shoot over you, pass around you, talk through you. And if the game got tight, he somehow looked even calmer. That calm bothered people. Pressure usually changes players. It speeds them up, makes them force shots. Bird was different. The bigger the moment got, the colder he seemed. And Magic saw that up close. Their rivalry became a mirror. Magic pushed Bird into brighter light. Bird pushed Magic into deeper seriousness. Each man forced the other to answer one brutal question every season. Are you really great? Or are you only great when I am not standing across from you? That question saved the NBA. It turned games into chapters. It turned finals matchups into cultural events. It made basketball feel like theater with consequences. And for a young Michael Jordan watching that world, the lesson was impossible to miss. Greatness was not just numbers. Greatness was narrative. Greatness was pressure. Greatness was walking into a rivalry where the entire sport was watching and acting like you owned the room. Bird had done that before Jordan reached the top. He had already helped drag the league into a new era. That is why Jordan's respect makes even more sense. Jordan was not praising a player who simply had good stats. He was acknowledging someone who helped make the stage big enough for Jordan to later dominate. Bird and Magic lifted the league. Jordan exploded it. But before Jordan became the global icon, Bird was already showing the basketball world what ruthless control looked like under championship pressure. Still, the rivalry with Magic only explains one side of Bird's legend. Because it is one thing to dominate when your body is fresh and the whole league is watching you at your peak. It is something else entirely to keep dominating when your body is slowly turning against you. By the late 1980s, Larry Bird's body was already starting to betray him. That is what makes his legend feel almost unreal. Because a lot of the moments people celebrate today did not happen while Bird was physically perfect. They happened while he was hurting, constantly, quietly, sometimes barely able to move. Teammates talked about seeing him stretched out on the floor before games with heat packs covering his back. Trainers working on him for long stretches just so he could loosen up enough to play. There were nights when simply standing upright looked painful. Then the game started, and somehow Bird still controlled everything. That disconnect confused people. How could someone who looked broken still dominate elite athletes? How could somebody moving slower than everyone else still dictate the pace of the game? Because Bird's greatness was never built on physical gifts alone. His mind carried him where his body could not. And honestly, that made him scarier. Anybody can look unstoppable when everything feels easy. The truly dangerous players are the ones who keep finding ways to win after the game starts taking pieces away from them. Bird became that kind of player. He once basically lived by the mentality that if he could walk, he could play. That sounds dramatic now, but people around him knew it was real. He was not trying to build mythology for cameras. He genuinely believed toughness was part of the job. That mentality earned him another level of respect inside the league, especially from players who understood how brutal an NBA season actually is. Karl Malone once said Bird was not quicker than you. He was tougher than you. And that sentence explains almost everything. Because Bird's toughness was not loud. He was not trying to inspire people with speeches. He was not flexing through pain for attention. He simply refused to let discomfort control the outcome. That mentality showed up most clearly in pressure moments. The bigger the stage got, the more Bird seemed to detach from panic completely. Pat Riley once gave one of the most unbelievable compliments in basketball history when talking about Bird and Jordan. He said if he needed one shot to win a game, he would choose Michael Jordan. But if he needed one shot to save his life, he would choose Larry Bird. Think about how insane that sounds coming from a coach who witnessed Jordan at his absolute peak. That is not just respect. That is trust under pressure. Riley understood something casual fans often miss about Bird. There was a strange calm around him late in games. Not relaxed, dangerous, like pressure made him sharper instead of heavier. And maybe no story captures that better than the famous 60-point game against Atlanta. Even decades later, the details sound fictional. Bird reportedly walked into the arena already talking about going for 60. Not hoping, not dreaming, expecting it. Then the game started. And little by little, the Hawks realized they were trapped inside somebody else's night. Bird started calling shots. Left wing jumper, corner three, bank shot, fadeaway. It did not matter. Everything felt automatic. But the craziest part was not even the scoring. It was the reaction from Atlanta's bench. At some point, the performance stopped feeling normal. Opposing players started laughing, smiling, celebrating shots against themselves because what they were witnessing no longer felt like competition. Felt like theater. Bird had crossed that invisible line where greatness becomes entertainment even for the people being destroyed by it. That almost never happens in professional sports. Players are too proud, too competitive, too angry to admire the opponent in real time. But Bird forced it out of them because the confidence was overwhelming. Every shot looked expected. Every possession looked controlled. And underneath all of it was the reality that his body was already wearing down. That is what gives Bird's legacy so much weight with older players. He was not just talented. He was relentless. There are plenty of athletes with more speed than Bird ever had. Plenty with higher jumps. Plenty with cleaner highlights. But very few players have ever combined intelligence, confidence, pain tolerance, and emotional control the way Bird did. That combination made him exhausting to play against. Because even if you defended him well physically, he kept attacking mentally. He kept reading reactions. He kept manipulating pace. He kept making defenders feel late even when they were technically in position. And once frustration entered the game, Bird knew exactly how to grow it. That is why so many legends still describe him differently than normal stars. They do not just talk about skill. They talk about presence, about feeling the game bend around him, about sensing control slip away possession by possession. And the older Bird got, the more obvious it became that his greatest weapon was never athletic dominance. It was understanding timing, understanding pressure, understanding people. That is the part modern debates struggle to measure. Because today's conversations usually begin with highlights and end with statistics. But Bird's greatness lived in spaces harder to quantify. And that is exactly why younger fans started underestimating him once the game evolved into a faster, flashier era. Modern basketball culture does not know what to do with Larry Bird. It knows how to celebrate speed. It knows how to celebrate vertical leap. It knows how to celebrate crossovers, chase down blocks, logo threes, shoe commercials, and 10-second clips. But Bird's greatness was never built for a 10-second clip. That is the problem. If you only judge him through highlights, you miss the part that made opponents afraid. You see the jumper, but not the setup. You see the pass, but not the manipulation. You see the slow feet, but not the fact that everyone was reacting to something Bird understood 2 seconds earlier. That is why younger fans reduce him to the wrong image. A great shooter, a smart passer, an old-school legend. All true, all incomplete, because the people who actually played against Bird do not talk about him like a museum piece. They talk about him like someone who took control of their confidence. Reputation is what fans debate later. Impact is what opponents remember when the arena is quiet. And Bird left that kind of impact everywhere. Magic Johnson knew it because Bird forced him to stay sharp. Charles Barkley knew it because Bird talked like the outcome was settled. Dominique Wilkins knew it because Bird attacked his pride early. Reggie Miller knew it because Bird's trash talk felt like scouting. That is what modern fans miss. Bird was not just talking because he was confident. He was talking because he had already diagnosed you. He watched your feet. He watched your shoulders. He watched how you reacted when the ball moved. He watched when you leaned too far, when your pride made you gamble. Then he punished the habit. That kind of dominance does not always look explosive. Sometimes it looks boring until you understand what is happening. The defender thinks he is competing. Bird knows he is being studied. Once Bird found the weakness, he did not rush. He kept pressing it slowly, calmly, almost cruelly, until the defender started playing against himself. That is basketball intelligence at its highest level. Not just knowing the game, knowing people. This is why could Bird play today? Question is usually framed badly. People ask if he had enough athleticism for today's NBA. But they ignore the things that translate in every era. Shooting translates. Passing translates. Size translates. Toughness translates. Decision-making translates. An elite basketball IQ absolutely translates. Put Bird in today's spacing, where defenders guard farther from the rim, shooters get more room, and offensive creators are protected more, and the conversation changes fast. Bird was already deadly when defenses could be more physical. Give him more space, more threes, better training, and a league built around skill, and the old argument starts looking lazy. No, he would not become a high-flying highlight machine. He would become something more annoying. A 6'9" problem who could shoot, pass, rebound, read every rotation, talk through every mistake, and make defenders feel exposed. That is why legends defend him so strongly. They are not protecting nostalgia. They are protecting memory. They remember the confidence. They remember the embarrassment. They remember realizing too late that he was controlling everything. Jordan understood that. That is why his respect carries so much weight. Jordan knew the difference between a good player and a dangerous one. He knew the difference between talent and control. He knew when somebody had the mental equipment to survive in any era. Bird had that. And that is why reducing him to just an 80s player is weak analysis. It ignores the part of basketball that never ages. Pressure, precision, confidence, fear. The ability to make another professional athlete doubt himself in front of the world. That does not expire. Every era gets faster. Every era gets flashier. Every era finds new numbers to argue about. But real greatness leaves witnesses. And Bird has too many witnesses to dismiss. Jordan, Magic, Barkley, Dominique, Reggie, Riley, teammates, opponents, coaches, people who stood close enough to feel the pressure. They all keep circling back to the same truth. Bird was not normal. He did not need to look like the future because he understood the game in a way the future still respects. That is why the disrespect around him feels so strange. Because Bird's game was not trapped in the past. The shorts were. The broadcast quality was. The pace of the league was. But the actual substance was timeless. A shooter with size. Passer with vision. Competitor with no fear. A trash talker whose words came with proof. A winner who made other legends measure themselves differently. That is not an outdated player. That is a blueprint. And once you understand that, Jordan's praise sounds less like a compliment and more like correction. He was not asking people to like Larry Bird. He was reminding them to stop lying about what he was. Because the final truth about Bird is even colder than the highlights show. He was not just beating players on the scoreboard. He was breaking them down piece by piece. Larry Bird did not just play basketball. He studied people. That is the final layer of his greatness most fans never fully see. Bird paid attention to everything. How defenders stood, which direction they leaned, how quickly they panicked after a missed shot, which players got emotional when embarrassed, which ones lost focus after trash talk, which ones gambled because their pride could not handle getting scored on repeatedly. Once he understood you, the game changed. Now he was not just reacting to your defense. He was controlling your habits. That is what made him terrifying to other legends. Because Bird did not overwhelm players physically the way some superstars did. He overwhelmed them mentally. He made the game feel slower for himself and faster for everyone else. While defenders were reacting possession by possession, Bird was already thinking several moves ahead. That is why so many opponents describe him almost like a chess player trapped inside a basketball body. He could see emotional cracks forming before they became visible. Then he attacked them patiently, relentlessly, and the coldest part? He would tell you while he was doing it. Bird wanted you fully aware of what was happening. He wanted defenders carrying the humiliation in real time. That psychological pressure built over games, over playoff series, over seasons. Eventually players stopped treating Bird like a normal matchup. He became an atmosphere, a feeling. The moment he walked into the arena, defenders already knew the mental pressure waiting for them. That kind of presence survives generations. It is why older legends still sound shaken when they tell Bird stories decades later. Not angry, shaken, because getting physically outplayed is one thing. Getting mentally controlled in front of thousands of people stays with you differently. That is why Jordan's respect mattered so much. Jordan recognized the same darkness in Bird that existed inside himself. The obsession, the need for control, the refusal to let pressure dictate outcomes. Jordan saw a player who understood competition beyond talent alone. That recognition was rare. Jordan did not go around protecting other players' legacies. If anything, he enjoyed proving people wrong. He enjoyed taking names away from conversations and replacing them with his own. But Bird remained different. Jordan never tried to erase him, because Bird had already earned something deeper than statistics. Fear. Real fear from elite competition. That is why the stories around Bird always sound strangely similar no matter who tells them. Magic Johnson talks about the pressure of those Celtics battles. Barkley talks about the trash talk. Dominique talks about the disrespect. Reggie talks about the predictions. Coaches talk about the control. Teammates talk about the calm. Different people. Same feeling. Bird made the game uncomfortable. And that discomfort is part of why his name refuses to disappear from basketball conversations no matter how much the sport changes. Every new era creates new stars, new debates, new favorites. But Bird keeps getting pulled back into the discussion because his greatness was never dependent on trends. It was built on timeless things. Skill, intelligence, toughness, confidence, control. Those things survive every era. That is why trying to dismiss Bird because he does not look modern completely misses the point. Greatness is not always supposed to look flashy. Sometimes it looks quiet. Sometimes it looks awkward. Sometimes it looks like a player calmly walking to a spot on the floor while everybody in the building somehow already knows the shot is going in. Bird lived inside those moments. And when you really think about it, that might be the biggest reason Jordan respected him. Bird understood the emotional side of competition at the highest possible level. He understood how pressure changes people. He understood how pride creates mistakes. He understood how confidence can collapse possession by possession. Jordan built his own empire using many of those same truths. So when Jordan defended Bird's greatness, it was not nostalgia talking. It was recognition. One basketball assassin recognizing another. And maybe that is the most important thing younger fans should understand about Larry Bird. His greatness was not created by old highlights, media stories, or romantic memories from a different era. It was created by witnesses, by legends who felt him up close, by rivals who still remember the pressure, by players who still laugh while telling Bird stories because even now the experience feels unbelievable. That kind of respect cannot be manufactured. It has to be earned. Bird earned it through championships, through rivalry, through pain, through confidence, through humiliation, through moments where he made some of the greatest athletes alive feel completely helpless. And that is why his legacy still hits so hard today. Because Larry Bird was never just great for his era. He was built for every era. A player who could walk into any generation, study the room, expose weaknesses, control the pressure, and still walk out owning the moment. Michael Jordan understood that. The legends understood that. And deep down, the basketball world has understood it for a very long time. And if you want more basketball stories like this, real rivalries, real pressure, real legends, and the moments that changed the game, subscribe to HOOPRADAR. Because here, we don't just talk about highlights. We break down the stories behind them.